Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news topic slash discussion video here. This one is about more Earth Avatar series leaks. So this is the sort of third wave of leaks. There's kind of two main things that have kind of happened here, which I will talk about. But first, I do want to just start with this. I posted this on Twitter, and I just want this to be out there in one of these videos to just get across that, like, hey, this is my overall approach for Avatar Studios in terms of my mentality when I think about these projects actually about to happen. We're getting kind of information on them right now. And I'm just going to read this out because I think it's kind of important, and I think a lot of people liked what I said when I posted this. I choose to be super open-minded about everything Avatar Studios. I've waited 10 years for new Avatar animation. I'm not going to ruin the build-up by knee-jerk reacting to information hugely lacking in context. My main takeaway from the leaks is just that they don't seem to be playing it safe by doing a by-the-numbers sequel. I'm a big Korra fan, and I love that they made a choice there to not do the at-the-time expected/wanted follow-up. I trust them to make a good show. And then also, plus, let's not forget that Avatar Studios is not just that Earth Avatar show. It's more than that. Multiple movies, multiple series. The Aang movie is a thing that exists, though obviously we don't really have leaks for it. We don't have information on it necessarily, but there is an Aang movie coming. They're doing more new stuff, more old stuff, and the three Avatar Studios main projects that we actually know about make this very obvious. We're getting an Aang movie, an Earth Avatar show, and a AAA Avatar game set in the past. So we're kind of dealing with, to a certain degree, the present, the kind of future of the franchise, but also we are going into the past as well. And plus other stuff. I'm assuming there'll be something with a Kyoshi or something like that at some point in some of these projects. There probably will be a more specific Korra thing at some point, and then who knows what else. We're getting other stuff. It's not all just on one project. Avatar Studios will probably have something for you. It's no longer a situation where we get one project every 10 years, which is basically the situation that we kind of had before, where 2005 to 2008 we had Avatar, Korra was 2012 to 2014, and now it's been a very long break between Korra and when we're finally going to get the first of these projects. But the point here being, I do think as a fandom, we should be a bit less reactionary about some of this stuff and try not to become like other fandoms where huge sections of the fandom only like one or two things, and there's just a absolute unwillingness to accept anything new. And there's a lot of confusion about what some of those fandoms kind of are, what they need going forward. I think as the Avatar fandom, we should try to be a bit open about this stuff. But anyway, final one here. You are allowed to have your opinion, and even for that opinion to be negative, but can we just overall be a bit better about how we have some of these discussions? Basically, less this looks bad, Avatar is dead. I've seen stuff like that. Some of the comments on my videos do feel like you have just ignored everything I said about this in terms of my discussion and just basically dropped a negative bomb in the chat, something along the lines of this. And can we have a little bit more like, hey, I have concerns, but I need more info, and just open-mindedness about this, just a bit more reasonable discussion. And then to add on to this in relation to what we're going to talk about in this video, because we're going to get into some of the lore stuff, can we be a bit better also about how we use lore in discussions and stuff like that? That I think too often than not, fandoms do tend to use the lore as a stick to kind of beat new stuff with, as no, that doesn't make sense because of this, instead of, hey, the lore is this kind of evolving thing. We don't know everything about the systems in Avatar, the details of Avatar. There's always room for new stuff to be introduced because we don't have a fundamental intrinsic knowledge of everything Avatar. And so I do think it is quite a limiting perspective to have, to just be like, with some of this new stuff as we're finding out about it, to just immediately dismiss it because other content says this or that, because inevitably there isn't really an inherent contradiction. It's just that you think this doesn't make sense because of whatever in information you've put together in your head and stuff like that. So That out of the way, let's get into this. So what is the new information? So the first piece of information is another test screener, basically, for the animatic stuff. This was also what the initial animatic leak was also about. So there's a link between these two in terms of like they're basically from the same thing, from the same day almost, effectively. Someone else who also got that same kind of screener kind of thing. Someone posted an image of basically the twins, the two twin characters, Jay, a new character, and both girls' cat animal companions. So there was that, along with a couple of other little details that apparently the benders in the world as we enter this era are drafted to fight in a war of some sort. Again, this is where some of the vagueness kind of came in. Was this the best explained in the best way possible? But at the very least, it gives us some sort of a detail about the idea of, okay, there is in addition to the wastelands maybe outside, there is also the sense if you do also go outside, you could be fighting a war. And what is this against? Is this against spirits or what? I don't really know. The second leak is one where it's not as clear cut. I'll just show it here. I'm not actually even sure where exactly this came from. I'm guessing this is more of a specifically kind of insider source where the actual specifically what was sent to him or whatever can't really be made public, but apparently both twins are the Avatar. They can both bend all four elements and they can both use the Avatar state, and this is in those first few episodes overall. And so this has definitely got people talking a lot, because even in my last video discussing this, I think I have it up here. I talk about it for the whole second part of it, about how I'm leaning in the direction of it probably is more of a they don't know which one is the Avatar situation, but actually it seems like they are actually going for both of them in some way, somehow are the Avatar, because of course both can use the four elements, both can use the Avatar state. Still not a lot of specifics overall, but it does seem like the series is going to use this as one of its main mysteries. And I want to make that clear. That very much seems like what this series is purposefully going out of its way to do. When you jump in, you are going to feel like you have no clue what's going on. This doesn't feel like the Avatar I know, because the world is different. There are two avatars now somehow, and whatever dynamic that they end up going for, we'll discuss it. But you are going to be probably asking all of these questions. Wait, how are there two twins that are both the Avatar? Wait, why is the world a wasteland now? Why are the nations gone? Why are there these 7 haven cities? And then when it comes to a lot of the Korra stuff about like what happened to the world, what did happen in the past to cause this? What did Korra do? And did whatever Korra do have any impact on the weirdness that now seems to be going on with the two kind of twin avatars? These are the interesting questions that you should be asking. Whereas instead of, I think, a lot of fans being like intrigued by these questions, people are immediately going like, no, all those questions break the lore. Instead of, in my mind, just kind of thinking like, there's probably a lot of lore that we don't know that explains this, and they're doing some new and interesting ideas, and I find that to be quite interesting overall. But anyway, so from the image, which also does have character names on it, so of course Pavi is our main character. We have seen her before. It's the same design basically used here, though it might be slightly different actually, because the image that we had previously I think has Pavi and Jay next to each other, whereas I think Pavi's next to a different character here, if I remember correctly. But either way, it's basically kind of same, slightly altered kind of character design. We get the name of the other sister, and as I kind of called, yes, her name does begin with N. It's actually Nisha. I'm not sure what exact pronunciation they're going to end up going for, but this is Pavi's twin sister, and also an avatar. Her design is slightly different. Pavi kind of is mainly wearing like pink with a cloak, whereas Nisha seems to be wearing kind of some blues for most part. Pavi kind of has her hair down, Nisha has her hair up, but overall you can see the similarities. Only Pavi is of course missing a leg. Jay is also there. It seems to be the exact same image as before, wearing the kind of uniform, pro-bending-esque kind of thing. I'm guessing it's probably more of an outfit specifically built to combat the sandstorm kind of weather outside. Overall, it just has a little bit of a kind of pro-bender kind of feel, maybe with some of the materials, because it makes sense. Those materials on the pro-bender uniforms are meant to sort of be like minimal armor against kind of bending attacks, so you assume that would also be pretty good against still being movable and stuff like that, breathable, but defending against stuff on the outside overall, which makes sense. New character here, Captain Karthik. Now, of course, we don't really know much about this character, but if you've read the casting information, there is a character referenced later on about someone called Karun, who is described to be part of the, I guess, Order of the White Lotus stuff, who is someone in his 40s. This character looks to be in or around that age, potentially, so this might be that character. Maybe suggesting that both characters are part of the White Lotus, but then there is some confusing stuff about, well, there's clearly some sort of a guard or like military structure in the cities. They're part of that, but like, are they also part of the White Lotus? And then like, what's connected, what's not connected, it's sort of unclear. Again, like I said, I think at the end of the previous video, there are symbols on the uniforms. Jay's is this one here, where it's the kind of arrow pointing down and there's a little orange triangle. Someone else was wearing this one. The one on Karthik, it's kind of a bit blurry, but it looks like it's the square, but the other kind of square inside is actually positioned up here this time. Does that mean anything? I don't know. But either way, that seems to be the situation there. And then also quite interestingly, we do get the visuals and names for both cats. So of course we know that Geet or Jeet is Pavi's kind of cat monkey animal companion. And as we see here, this is a mix of kind of white, grey. There's a few different shades of grey in here, but overall relatively light colored for Pavi's cat. And then the other cat, which I guess is Nisha's, because I think the casting information establishes that like both of them have their cats, I think, interacting with each other. This is Ruhi, and Ruhi is black, primarily dark grey. There are still little bits of white, but very much you get the impression between the two cats. One is very light colored and one leans a lot darker colored. Very interesting from a symbolism perspective also is that at the center of the foreheads on the cats is like a marking in the shape of basically a diamond, and one of them is dark and one of them is light. So there seems to be that sort of mirroring effect with the two animals. And I don't know if they're doing a lot of this stuff, like say with the cats, to lead you in the direction of thinking Rava Vatu, but they're going to kind of pull the rug out from underneath us and reveal it's actually something different. Because that's what's kind of going on here. There's clearly some sort of a mystery going on in the show about the details behind why on earth a lot of the world is the way it is. And I'm guessing they're going to build up the truth about why they happen to both be the Avatar. And I'm guessing we will maybe explore the idea of maybe they initially think it's Rava Vatu, maybe it ends up being something else, or they could do it in reverse. We just simply don't know. The rest of the discussion is ultimately just going to be about the two avatars and going in depth on kind of what we know now and how this actually could work. And just kind of presenting the idea of, I think unlike what a lot of people are saying, based on like the lore, it's impossible for this stuff to happen. They would have to break the lore to make this happen. And my thoughts are like, what lore are you talking about that specifically prevents some of this stuff from happening? There's tons of openings for a lot of this stuff to happen. Avatar, I would say overall, is a relative, the stuff that it has, bending and spirituality, it's a relatively soft system. Sure, you would say most of some of the stuff related to bending leans maybe a little bit more being kind of like hard magic, where there's a lot of rules to it. But there's definitely openings for the full scope of powers, and especially stuff like energy bending feels very like that's a soft kind of magic system. And then a lot of the spiritual stuff definitely starts to get more, we can more or less do whatever we want here within reason ultimately. So I think there's a lot of points where they can add in lore that doesn't contradict other stuff and do things in interesting ways. So let's get into this here. So obviously none of the information so far, even though there's been a lot of speculation about it, none of the actual leaks mention Rava, Vatu, the idea of there being a dark avatar. A lot of it is sort of just like, well, people clearly, I guess, have seen both girls using avatar state, using multiple bending. And I guess they're in that sense, it's like, okay, they're both avatars. There's a clear leaning in that direction that the White Lotus are looking after both girls because they clearly are both avatars. But I don't think anyone who's watched the initial stuff that's been out there, the test stuff, actually has the details on why this is the case. No one actually has the explanation. There's just a lot of guesses because they only got to see maybe the first 2-3 episodes or whatever it was. My understanding of it is that the screening stuff was all like animatics, so I don't think any of it is colored. And one of the things that could have shown this is that if it was in color, if there was Dark Avatar involvement here, the Dark Avatar's eyes glow red, as we saw from Unalaq in Book 2. And I'm guessing the fact that this hasn't come up is a clear indication that no one actually knows for sure. So either people know that it is both eyes glowing white or whatever, or we just don't know what the color is for either girl ultimately. So that's interesting. As for how they might explain this, how there are two avatars, there are of course two general avenues to go down. The obvious one probably is the idea that, okay, one of them is the avatar as in the light avatar using Rava as the sort of power source, that is the connection, and then the other one would be the dark avatar using Vatu as the kind of spirit connection empowerment. That makes sense because it's a dynamic we saw before in Korra. We know that the avatar is not an inherently unique entity. The specifics of the light avatar as having like 4 elements and the spirit powers is unique, of course, because the dark avatar does not have all 4 elements. But again, I think there are ways to make a lot of this stuff work. So the other one would be that Vatu is not involved and that Rava is somehow linked or split into both twins. And the idea is that kind of to a certain degree, both twins might actually be the reincarnation of Korra in some unique way because of, basically spirit-related stuff here, ultimately. Now, let's get into talking about light and dark avatars. Let's go in on this and see if we can maybe figure out some stuff. I do want to clarify just the details specifically here, because especially when it comes to Vatu, I think a lot of people have probably either not watched Book 2 recently enough to have it in their heads, the full details, or just never understood Book 2 enough to know the details. Because a lot of the discussion about Book 2 in the fandom has always been pretty terrible, because most people can't get their critical opinions out of the way enough to actually discuss the information presented properly. But anyway, what happened with Vatu? How was Vatu defeated by Korra in Book 2 Spirits? And where is he in the aftermath of that defeat? So again, Korra defeated the Dark Avatar, Vatu and Unalaq combined, Unavatu, using light spirit bending. Again, this was the technique that Korra learned from Unalaq. It is just a water bending technique using spirituality as a way to basically purify, kind of alter the balance of spirits towards light, basically, is the idea. It's a way to, quote unquote, defeat spirits. She uses light spirit bending on Unavatu immediately after pulling Rava out of him, as we saw in the finale. So what spirit bending does, it is a purification technique for dark spirits to allow them to kind of move on in a kind of peaceful way. But it still is a technique where you are, in essence, defeating the spirit. You are, quote unquote, destroying them just in a peaceful way to allow them to be reborn or reform in a peaceful way. Because again, remember, spirits can't really ever be permanently destroyed. If you do happen to destroy their form, they just are reborn into a different form. We have seen this before. The Rift comic, General Old Iron, Aang destroys his old iron kind of warrior form, and he then transforms into the kind of spirit kind of crab things or whatever. We saw that directly happen. The same basically happens with Raava and Vaatu, but they have extra stuff attached to them, which is obviously the idea that light and dark can't ever be truly destroyed, but the idea is that that's just an inherent link between the two, but spirit still can't ever be fully destroyed overall. So when you do this, like I say here, you do just kind of allow them to reform in a kind of more peaceful way, where you've gotten rid of the imbalance, and now they can be reborn in a more kind of balanced way. There is dark spirit bending. I think people forget sometimes that this is actually a thing. Unalaq threatened to do this, or he was basically nearly about to complete the technique on Jinora, literally saying that if he finished it, this would quote-unquote destroy her soul, which I take it to be as like a slightly different from what light spirit bending does, in that like this might actually be a way to actually truly finally destroy someone's spirit, as in it won't reincarnate, it's just a pure destruction technique. But I don't think we actually know the full scope of this overall, because it's only really been brought up like once or twice, as in this was the attempted spirit bending done by Unalaq against Korra and like Jinora, but it never actually went off. The idea is that Vaatu and Unalaq were defeated by light spirit bending, but still, it is a technique that in essence kind of quote-unquote killed both of them. So yeah, Korra kills Unalaq. We're literally we get this in the aftermath of this, and it quote-unquote destroys Vaatu. Again, Vaatu's form was destroyed, but he is not destroyed forever and all times. He will reform. That is the idea ultimately. The other takeaway also is that this has to be considered killing the Dark Avatar in the Dark Avatar state. As in, this should end the Dark Avatar cycle. Either way, regardless of what way you word this, as part of what happens here, Vaatu is defeated, which, based on what happened with Raava in the previous episode, where the past lives were lost, which broke the cycle, but it wasn't Korra being defeated in the Avatar state. It highlights that basically the understanding here is that the ways you can break an Avatar cycle are, one, by, yes, if an Avatar is killed in the Avatar state, the cycle ends. But the reason it ends is because what gets killed in that case, human and spirit at the same time. You are destroying Raava at the same time as you're destroying the human. And that is the reason the cycle ends. What happened to Raava highlights that the other way you can do it is that you don't even need to kill the human. You can rip Raava out, destroy her, and that destroys the connection as well. And thus the cycle, and of course, we know Korra was able to eventually remake that connection with harmonic convergence once again. So there shouldn't be a quote-unquote reincarnation of Unalaq overall. No, that was separated, and the reason we lean on the idea that Vaatu is now quote-unquote reborn in Raava is because that's directly what was told to us, that they each can't ever truly fully defeat the other. Even if they do win, the other will just be reborn in them, and they'll eventually fight again at the next harmonic convergence. So yes, there is no Dark Avatar cycle as far as we know. And again, there is room for some stuff to happen in all of this, but the idea, of course, is that are we actually going to somehow reveal that in between potentially Unalaq and Nisha, there is another part of the cycle in there for the Dark Avatar? I don't really think so. It gets kind of complicated, but we'll see what they do. And yeah, the result of this is that based on what was explained to us, both by Raava dialogue from within the episodes, but also what the creators have said in interviews, is that yeah, Vaatu should be reborn in Raava in the same way as, of course, like I referenced, Raava had to be pulled out of Vaatu just before Korra defeated him. That's the way that the dynamic between these two spirits actually works. So yeah, Vaatu should be within Raava. this should create a situation where we have Korra, of course, bonded forever with Raava, but also Raava, through the kind of light-dark link, connected to Vaatu, with him literally a small part of her. But of course, Vaatu is not bonded forever with Korra. Just because Vaatu is in there doesn't mean that, Korra is also the Dark Avatar. She just happens to have that spirit as part of her because of the Raava-Vaatu connection. Because, of course, Korra never harmonic convergence bonded with Vaatu. And that's a notable detail here that is probably one of the big things that are going to have to explain, as we'll kind of get into here. So yeah, the idea, like, going forward was that the idea is that Vaatu shouldn't really be much of a threat for the next kind of many thousands of years, and should only become a danger coming up to the next harmonic convergence, literally 10,000 years into the future. That multiple avatars should be able to go by without him playing a role overall. At least that's what was said to us kind of during Korra the show. Now obviously, 10 years have passed. They might have come up with a different idea to handle this in a slightly different way, because we're talking about 2020, 3, 4, 5, 6 content and ideas behind the scenes versus stuff that was said to us back in like 2013, basically. But that is the sort of view on this, is that is, as at least as far as up to like Korra's life, Vaatu should be just in there as part of the dynamic somewhere. They may have changed their minds on this, kind of realizing that they do have an opportunity to do something interesting with Vaatu being inside Korra, with regards to the question of like, when Korra dies, what happens to Vaatu? I think their logic from before makes a lot of sense, is that the way the normal cycle works, when the Avatar cycle doesn't end, is just that the human dies and Raava effectively follows their spirit into the next kind of reincarnation, effectively. Raava doesn't die every time a new Avatar happens. Raava just kind of, she is bonded to that spirit, and so follows it to where it kind of shows up next, effectively. That's why the whole cycle is facilitated by that connection of Raava to basically Wan's spirit overall. And as part of Raava, a little speck of darkness is in there that is Vaatu. But are they going with that idea of it's as simple as that we can go through multiple avatars with Vaatu just slowly over thousands of years beginning to get bigger and bigger and bigger, until harmonic convergence he will be much more of a threat? But obviously, the unique dynamic here is that this is the first time we're moving the cycle on with Vaatu as part of the equation, and there's absolutely room to do something interesting that we don't know about. As in, you don't have to break the lore here, you can just establish that this is a new dynamic. We don't know about how exactly this works. In the same way that the formation of the Avatar all those years ago was something different that changed the balance of power, this changes things as well to a certain degree, especially with the Avatar being one of a set of twins. That's all of a sudden we have an extra spirit and an extra human, and you can sort of maybe see how the idea is beginning to come together here. But there are some, and again, I'm going to frame these as just problems that need to be explained, probably at some point in this, that don't seem to kind of line up now. Notice I'm not framing this as, here's the lore they're going to break and it's going to be a disaster. No, these are just problems that they have to be clever about how they solve. With the Dark Avatar idea, this is the problem. One, we apparently know both girls have the 4 elements. The 4 elements have never been part of the Dark Avatar. The Dark Avatar had water bending because Unalaq was a water bender, no other bending. We literally saw the journey of how Wan and Raava got the elements from the line turtles. This, of course, never happened with Unalaq and Vaatu. And if Vaatu is part of Raava, there's no opportunity for Vaatu to go out separately and get the go to Lion Turtles to get that, because we don't even know what the situation is with other Lion Turtles going forward. But, and this is an important point, if Vaatu is literally inside part of Raava, who is connected to the Avatar, Vaatu to a certain degree is right next to the power of the four elements. And the way that these work when it comes to the Lion Turtle giving out the elements is that it's not necessarily the case that it's just, here is one power of fire, you have it, I don't have it. No, the Lion Turtle could still give other people fire, even though like Juan had fire. So it seems to be the idea that you can literally sort of like just take part of the power, but the core power is still there. So Vaatu could, to a certain degree as far as we're aware, claim that. Because if the Lion Turtles have the ability to effectively give the power to a human, and then a spirit can just go inside a human and effectively take one element, give them another, which is the training of Juan initially. And I guess Vaatu can do the same if just he comes across that power within the unique combined entity that is all of these things together. So I think there is a way for the four elements to suddenly become part of Vaatu. Will they go into the weeds to explain all of this stuff? That's maybe the other question. So there's that. But then this is probably the big one here, because they came up with this as the reason to explain why this is something that can't just happen super randomly. Why there is only really two spirits out there and like one opportunity every 10,000 years to create an avatar-like being. And that is, you need harmonic convergence to bond the human and spirit forever. What has bonded, theoretically, Vaatu with Nisha? Now, Vaatu has done this before with Unalaq, but unless we're saying that the Dark Avatar cycle is alive and well, and somehow Nisha is the next in line to that, where the connection is already there, but then how do you explain the gap period? It's a bit weird. This is probably the big thing that like needs an answer, because there is no harmonic convergence between basically, Korra's death. There's none between the one that we saw in book 2 and the next one, which is thousands of years away. So they might need a way to get around this. And again, I think there maybe is, but these are some of the things that if they go down this road, they might have to do a little bit of explaining with, just to be clear. Next, the two light spirits, two light Raava avatars. And again, this is the idea of the concept of spirits splitting their energy or life force is already present in the series through Yue and the Moon Spirit. As in, the Moon Spirit was able to literally give a child part of their spirit to allow that child to live. Then, the Moon Spirit itself was killed because it took on a mortal form, and it was allowed to sort of quote unquote live through Yue still having some of that life force there. So the idea is that like Yue to a certain degree had powers, the Moon Spirit had powers, and they both operated at the same time. What exactly is the thing that split Raava in this case? Was it something crazy that happened at the end of Korra's time as the Avatar that caused this split to happen? Or is it more the idea that, hey, let's play on the idea of these being special twins, that like, two bodies, one spirit type thing, that this is different than normal twins where you think there's an inherent connection. There's actually there's a spiritual connection that goes beyond the normal here, that literally two people have never been as connected inherently as these two. And so Raava just inherently was reborn in both of them. Now, as we discussed before, this does create complicated situations about what happens to this twin when this thing happens and the other twin's doing another thing. Looking into the future, what if one dies? Does that leave the other one as being the one remaining avatar, or does it go away and they both need to survive? Whatever. But instead of, in a way, viewing those as being, oh, these are the hurdles to overcome, those very questions might be the reason they wanted to go down this path. That, no, we're going to tackle these things quite head on. We want this dual avatar dynamic. We love the visual. We love the kind of interesting dynamics that are actually present here about stuff like, hey, maybe they can both only use the avatar state if they're right next to each other. Maybe they have to be like almost literally touching to use the avatar state together. That will kind of be an interesting one, that to a certain degree, okay, they both have 4 elements and they can use them that way. But the power of the avatar state can only happen if they like hold hands or something like that. And they have to be inherently kind of linked together to make a lot of this stuff happen. There are interesting ideas, and I just feel like trying to overly like take apart these ideas, especially when, one, we don't know the full story. The setup here and the way we're learning about this is clearly vague information, vague descriptions of not finalized episodes and information from various different stages of, you know, early-ish production on the show. So a lot of it is coming out of context, and we don't know what the full scope is. And then, again, trying to use our current understanding of the lore to explain, or in more negative cases, to just like shut down this as like, no, this is awful because of this, this, and this. We don't know what the approach to new lore, new interesting ideas is actually going to be. And when I say new stuff, it doesn't have to be retcons. There could just be new interesting elements explored. Like I covered kind of earlier on here. It's this idea of, you know, yeah, first new transition between avatars with Vaatu as part of the equation. Not trapped in the tree anymore, but literally a part of Rava. Does it just go smoothly? Or is there an interesting thing where he is partially freed in some way by this happening? And the fact that that's there, that's an opening for the writers to latch on to as a way to create this new and unique dynamic. And I think not enough people are looking at it from like almost that perspective, that this is not locked down by the lore. There is so many openings to do interesting stuff with if they want. And again, going back to this, can we just make an effort to not knee-jerk be like, this is awful because of this? There's a story to be told here, and I really heavily believe that all the stuff that we've kind of found out about is probably the core mysteries and all the stuff that will be explored here. Why is the world the way it is? How do we fix the world? What happened in the past that forced Korra to do whatever she actually did? And yeah, why do we have twin avatars? Is that a cause of the past, or is it just something new that has happened? Is it Rava and Vaatu, or is it just 2 Rava avatars, or something else? I think it's interesting, and I would just ask people to just try and approach these discussions in a little bit of a better way overall. It's just that whole idea. So there's the video. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on things after this 3rd round of leaks. Maybe not as much here as some of the other stuff, but certainly maybe one of the bigger kind of half confirmations, of course, because it's all still leaked information. Nothing is absolutely locked down in stone, but I think it's very difficult to just deny that none of this is real at this point. Something along the lines of this stuff is going to be what this series is. Yeah, that's just the situation. So let me know your thoughts below, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.